Maria Lopez, a Texas waitress, stole $3 million from the Bloods and vanished overnight. Maria Lopez wiped down the same table for the third time that evening, her hands moving in mechanical circles as her mind raced through calculations that had nothing to do with tips or shift schedules. The fluorescent lights of Eddie's diner hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the worn linoleum floor where she'd spent the last 7 years serving burgers and coffee to truckers, families, and occasionally men in red bandanas who spoke in hushed tones at the corner booth. The Houston heat pressed against the diner's windows, even at 9 p.m., making the air conditioner work overtime. Maria's dark hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, revealing the exhaustion etched into her 32-year-old face. She'd been working double shifts for months, saving every penny she could scrape together, but it was never enough. Her daughter Sophia needed surgery, the kind that insurance wouldn't cover, and the bills kept piling up like a mountain she couldn't climb. "Maria, booth 7 needs refills," her manager Carl called from behind the counter. She nodded, grabbing the coffee pot with practiced ease. If you're enjoying this story so far, please subscribe and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's continue with Maria's journey. Booth 7 was occupied by 3 men she'd seen before. They always came in on Thursday nights, always ordered the same thing, and always left generous tips. The one they called Dante was the leader, his red bandana folded neatly in his jacket pocket, his eyes constantly scanning the room like a predator assessing threats. Maria had learned to keep her head down, pour the coffee, and disappear. "Thanks, sweetheart," Dante said, his voice smooth as silk. He was studying a notebook, numbers scrawled across the pages in cramped handwriting. Maria's eyes caught on those numbers as she poured, her breath hitching when she recognized what she was seeing. Addresses, amounts, dates. This was a ledger, and the amounts were staggering. She finished pouring and turned to leave, but Dante's hand shot out, gripping her wrist, not hard but firm enough to stop her. "You see something interesting?" Maria's heart hammered against her ribs. "No, sir, just doing my job." Dante studied her for a long moment, then released her. "Good, keep it that way." That night, Maria lay awake in her cramped apartment, Sophia sleeping peacefully in the next room. The medical bills sat on her kitchen table, red stamps screaming "final notice" across the top. She thought about those numbers in Dante's notebook, $3 million moving through various locations across Houston, drop houses, collection points, money that belonged to the Bloods, money that funded operations she didn't want to think about. She thought about her daughter's pale face, the way Sophia had stopped running and playing, how the girl clutched her chest sometimes when she thought her mother wasn't looking. The surgery would cost $200,000, $200,000 she didn't have and would never have working at Eddie's diner. The next Thursday, Maria paid closer attention. She memorized the addresses Dante reviewed, the dates, the amounts. She learned that the money moved on Fridays, collected from various operations, and consolidated before being distributed up the chain. She learned that Dante was careless, arrogant in his power, certain that a waitress was beneath his notice. For 3 weeks, Maria gathered information like a spy in her own life. She learned that the consolidation happened at a warehouse on the east side, that only 2 men guarded it during the transfer window, that the money sat there for exactly 4 hours before being moved again. She learned the security codes by watching Dante punch them into his phone while she refilled his coffee. She learned the guards' names, their schedules, their weaknesses. But knowing and doing were 2 different things entirely. "Mama, when can I go back to school?" Sophia asked one morning, her small hand pressed against her chest. The girl was 8 years old and shouldn't have to worry about whether her heart would keep beating. "Soon, baby. Very soon." That night, Maria made her decision. She wasn't a thief, wasn't a criminal, But she was a mother, and a mother would burn the world down to save her child. She called in sick to Eddie's diner for the first time in 7 years. She withdrew the $3,000 she'd saved from the bank. She bought a used van with cash from a lot that didn't ask questions. She packed 2 bags, one for her and one for Sophia, with only the essentials. Friday arrived like a death sentence or a salvation. She couldn't decide which. Maria dropped Sophia at her sister Carmen's house with a story about a job interview in Dallas. Carmen looked skeptical, but didn't push. "You look different," her sister said, "scared." "I'm terrified," Maria admitted. "But I'm doing what I have to do." The warehouse was exactly where she'd memorized it would be. Grey concrete walls, few windows, surrounded by chain-link fence. Maria had stolen the gate code from Dante's phone, memorizing it in the 3 seconds she'd had before he'd noticed her proximity. The guards changed shift at 6 p.m., and there was a 15-minute window when only one man was present. Maria waited in her van across the street, watching through binoculars she'd bought at a pawn shop. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold them steady. This was insane. This was suicide. The Bloods didn't forgive, didn't forget. If she failed, if she was caught, they wouldn't just kill her, they'd make an example of her. But Sophia's face floated in her mind, and Maria steadied her breathing. At 6:15, she saw one guard leave. The other, a man named Carlos she'd heard Dante mention, was inside. Carlos liked to smoke during his shift, stepping out back for a cigarette every 30 minutes like clockwork. Maria had 15 minutes. She drove the van through the gate, her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The security code worked. The side door opened with a quiet click. The warehouse was dimly lit, filled with wooden crates and metal shelving, and there, on a table in the center of the room, were black duffel bags, 6 of them. Maria's entire body was trembling as she approached. She unzipped one bag and nearly gasped. Cash. Stacks and stacks of $100 bills, bound with rubber bands. She didn't have time to count, didn't have time to think. She grabbed the bags, 3 in her arms, then ran back for the other 3. They were heavier than she'd expected, and she nearly dropped one, loading them into the van. Carlos would be back in 5 minutes, maybe less. Maria drove out of the warehouse through the gate and merged into Houston traffic with $3 million of blood money in the back of her van. Her heart was beating so hard she thought it might explode. Her vision was tunneling. She forced herself to breathe, to drive normally, to not attract attention. She picked up Sophia from Carmen's house. "Did you get the job?" her sister asked. "Yes," Maria lied. "We're moving to Dallas tonight." Carmen's eyes widened. "Tonight?" "Maria, what's going on? I can't explain. Please just trust me. If anyone asks, you don't know where we went. You never saw us leave. Promise me." Carmen looked at her sister's face, and whatever she saw there made her nod. "Okay. Be safe." Maria drove north, with Sophia sleeping in the passenger seat. She didn't go to Dallas. She drove to San Antonio, ditched the van in a parking garage, and bought bus tickets to El Paso with cash. From El Paso, they crossed into New Mexico. In Albuquerque, she rented a storage unit and buried 5 of the duffel bags behind a false wall she paid a contractor to build. She kept 1 bag with her, split into smaller amounts hidden in various locations. By the time Dante discovered the theft, Maria Lopez, the waitress, had vanished. Her apartment was empty, her phone disconnected. She'd left no digital trail, no credit card transactions, nothing that could be traced. In a small town in Colorado, Maria and Sophia checked into a motel under a false name. Sophia was confused but excited about their adventure. Maria sat on the motel bed, staring at the bag of money, and finally allowed herself to cry. She'd crossed a line she could never uncross. She'd stolen from one of the most dangerous gangs in America. They would hunt her. They would never stop hunting her, but Sophia would get her surgery. Sophia would live, and for that, Maria would pay any price. The next morning, Maria bought a burner phone and started making calls to private hospitals that specialized in pediatric cardiology. She had the money now. She had everything she needed except safety, and that was a luxury she'd traded away the moment she'd walked into that warehouse. In Houston, Dante stood in the empty warehouse, his face a mask of cold fury. $3 million. Gone. The security footage had been erased, but he didn't need footage to know who'd taken it. There was only one person who'd been watching him, who'd been close enough to learn the codes and schedules, only one person stupid or desperate enough to try something this suicidal. "Find her," he told his men. "Find Maria Lopez. And when you do, make sure everyone knows what happens to people who steal from us." The hunt had begun, and Maria was running for both their lives. Maria chose a small clinic in Boulder, Colorado, far from the networks she imagined the BLOODS controlled. Dr. Sarah Mitchell was a specialist who asked few questions when Maria paid $75,000 in cash up front for Sophia's surgery. The woman's eyebrows had risen, but she'd simply counted the bills and scheduled the operation. "Your daughter's condition is serious," Dr. Mitchell had said, studying Sophia's medical records that Maria had managed to transfer. "This surgery will repair the hole in her heart, but she'll need follow-up care. Are you prepared for that?" "I'll do whatever it takes," Maria had replied, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. The surgery took 8 hours. Maria sat in the waiting room, alternating between prayer and paranoia. Every person who walked through the door might be one of Dante's people. Every glance from a stranger felt like a threat. She'd cut and dyed her hair, bought colored contacts to change her brown eyes to green, and started wearing glasses she didn't need. She looked different, but would it be different enough? When Dr. Mitchell emerged with a tired smile, Maria nearly collapsed with relief. The surgery was successful. Sophia's going to be okay. Maria saw her daughter in recovery, pale but breathing steadily, monitors beeping with the strong rhythm of a repaired heart. She held Sophia's small hand and whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "We're going to be okay, baby. We're safe now." But safety was an illusion, and Maria knew it. While Sophia recovered over the next 3 weeks, Maria established a new life. She rented a small house on the outskirts of Boulder under the name Elena Rodriguez. She enrolled Sophia in a local school as Sophia Rodriguez. She got a job at a grocery store, paying cash for everything, leaving no paper trail. She was careful, methodical, always looking over her shoulder. Meanwhile, in Houston, Dante was tearing the city apart looking for her. He'd put the word out on the streets, offered a $50,000 reward for information leading to Maria Lopez. He'd questioned her sister Carmen so aggressively that the woman had broken down crying, swearing she didn't know anything. He'd tracked down Maria's few friends, her former neighbors, anyone who might have a clue where she'd gone. But Maria had disappeared like smoke, and Dante wasn't used to losing. "She can't hide forever," he told his Lieutenant Marcus one evening as they sat in the back room of a club the BLOODS controlled. "Everyone makes mistakes. She'll use a credit card, call someone from her old life, something. And when she does, we'll be waiting." Marcus nodded, but privately he wondered. $3 million could buy a lot of hiding. The woman must have been planning this for weeks, maybe months. She was smarter than Dante gave her credit for. In Boulder, Sophia started school and began to bloom. Color returned to her cheeks. She ran and played like a normal child for the first time in years. Maria watched her daughter with a mixture of joy and terror, knowing that every happy moment was borrowed time. One evening, as Maria walked home from the grocery store, she noticed a car following her. A dark sedan with tinted windows, moving slowly 3 car lengths behind. Her heart rate spiked. She turned down a side street and the car turned too. She picked up her pace, and the car matched her speed. Maria ducked into a convenience store, her breath coming in short gasps. She watched through the window as the sedan passed by slowly, then continued down the street. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was paranoia. Or maybe they'd found her. That night, Maria packed emergency bags and hid them in different locations around Boulder. One in a storage locker, one buried in a park, one with a woman she'd befriended at work who thought her name was Eleanor and knew nothing about her past. If they had to run again, she'd be ready. But weeks passed, and nothing happened. The sedan didn't return. No one came asking questions. Sophia thrived making friends and getting straight A's. Maria began to relax, just slightly, allowing herself to imagine that maybe they'd gotten away with it. That was her first mistake. The second mistake was going back to the storage unit in Albuquerque. She told herself she needed to move the money, that keeping 5 duffel bags of cash in one location was too risky. She told herself she'd be careful, in and out, nobody would even notice. She left Sophia with her new friend Jessica for a weekend work trip and drove the 8 hours south to New Mexico. The storage facility looked exactly as she'd left it 6 months ago. Maria used her key to enter, checked that no one was watching, and opened Unit 237. The duffel bags were still there, hidden behind the false wall. She started loading them into her car, working quickly, efficiently. She didn't notice the man watching from 3 units down until it was too late. His name was Raymond, and he worked for the BLOODS New Mexico distribution network. He'd been checking on his own storage unit, filled with product they were moving through the southwest corridor, when he'd spotted a woman acting suspiciously. Something about her movements, the way she kept looking around, the heavy bag she was loading into a nondescript sedan. Raymond took a photo with his phone and sent it to his contacts. Anyone know this woman? Acting sketchy at the Albuquerque storage place. The photo made its way through the network, from New Mexico to Texas, until it landed on Dante's phone. He stared at the image, zooming in on the woman's face. The hair was different, the glasses were new, but he recognized the bone structure, the way she held herself. "Found you," Dante whispered. Maria drove back to Boulder with $5 million in her trunk, unaware that she'd just painted a target on her back. She arrived home late at night, parked in her garage, and started moving the bags into a new hiding spot she'd prepared in the crawl space under her house. She was exhausted, her muscles aching from the drive and the heavy lifting. She allowed herself one moment of satisfaction. They had enough money to last years, to build a real life. Sophia was healthy and happy. Maybe they really would be okay. The knock on her door came 3 days later, at 6 in the morning. Maria was making breakfast when she heard it, 3 sharp raps that made her blood run cold. She looked through the peephole and saw 2 men in business suits. They looked official, professional. "Mrs. Rodriguez?" one of them called. "We need to speak with you about a financial matter." Maria's hand was shaking as she reached for the doorknob. This was it. They'd found her. But when she opened the door, the men showed her FBI badges. "I'm Special Agent Torres. This is Agent Williams. We'd like to ask you some questions about a storage unit in Albuquerque registered under your name." For a moment, Maria felt relief. The FBI, not the BLOODS. Then reality crashed down. The FBI investigating her storage unit meant they'd connected her to something, and if the FBI had found her, Dante couldn't be far behind. "I don't know what you're talking about," Maria said, her voice surprisingly steady. Agent Torres smiled without warmth. "Mrs. Rodriguez? Or should I say, Mrs. Lopez? We know about the storage unit, we know about the money, and we know where it came from. They'd been investigating the BLOODS operations for 2 years, Torres explained, as they sat in Maria's living room. They'd tracked the stolen money through various channels, following the digital breadcrumbs Maria thought she'd erased. They knew she'd taken $3 million from a gang-controlled warehouse. They knew she'd fled Texas, and they wanted to make a deal. "Testify against Dante Williams and his organization," Torres said. "Tell us everything you saw, everything you heard during your time serving them at that diner. Help us build our case, and we'll offer you witness protection. You and your daughter will be safe." Maria looked at these two men offering her salvation wrapped in chains. Witness protection meant a lifetime of hiding, new identities every few years, always looking over her shoulder. But it also meant legitimacy, safety backed by the federal government. "What if I refuse? Then we arrest you for theft and money laundering. Your daughter goes into foster care while you serve 10 to 15 years in federal prison." It wasn't really a choice at all. Maria spent the next 3 months working with the FBI, telling them everything she'd observed during her years at Eddie's diner. Dates, times, faces, conversations overheard. She drew maps of territories, identified players in photographs, provided details about cash flows and operations. She was a gold mine of information, and the FBI knew it. But every piece of information she gave them was another nail in her coffin if the Bloods ever found her. Sophia noticed the change in her mother, the way Maria startled at sudden noises, the way she kept the curtains drawn and checked the locks 3 times before bed. "Mama, are we in trouble?" the girl asked one night. "No, baby, I'm just being careful. Because of the bad men from Texas." Maria's blood froze. "What do you know about bad men from Texas?" "I heard you talking to those agents. I'm not a baby, Mama. I know something's wrong." Maria pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the strong, steady beat of her repaired heart. "I did something bad to help you, Sophia. I took money that didn't belong to me so you could have your surgery. And now we have to face the consequences. Will they hurt us? Not if I can help it." The trial began in Houston 4 months later. Maria was transported under heavy security, wearing a bulletproof vest under her clothes, surrounded by federal marshals who never left her side. The courtroom was packed with reporters, lawyers, and in the back rows, men in red who stared at her with murder in their eyes. Dante sat at the defense table, impeccably dressed in a suit, his face calm and confident. When Maria took the stand, their eyes met, and she saw the promise of death in his gaze. "Do you see the man who kept a ledger of illegal operations at Eddie's diner?" the prosecutor asked. Maria pointed at Dante. "Yes, that's him." For 3 days, Maria testified. She described the meetings, the money, the violence she'd witnessed and overheard. She provided the prosecution with everything they needed to paint a picture of Dante as a high-ranking member of a criminal organization. The defense attorney tried to discredit her, pointing out that she was a thief who'd stolen $3 million, that she'd made a deal to save herself from prison, that her testimony was bought and paid for with her freedom. "Isn't it true, Mrs. Lopez, that you stole money from Mr. Williams?" "Yes." "Look, and isn't it true that you'd say anything to avoid going to prison yourself?" "No, I'm telling the truth. A truth that's very convenient for you." Maria looked at the jury, then back at the attorney. "I stole money to save my daughter's life. I'm not proud of it, but I'd do it again. What I'm testifying to now has nothing to do with my theft. These are things I saw and heard over 7 years of serving Mr. Williams and his associates. These are facts." The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned with a guilty verdict on multiple counts of racketeering, drug trafficking, and money laundering, Dante's face remained expressionless. But as he was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, he looked directly at Maria and mouthed 2 words, "You're dead." The FBI kept Maria and Sophia in protective custody during the trial, but afterward they were entered into the Witness Protection Program. New names, new histories, new lives. They became Jennifer and Emma Carson, relocated to a small town in Vermont, far from the urban sprawl where gangs operated. Maria got a job at a library, quiet work that suited her new need for invisibility. Sophia, now Emma, adapted with the resilience of children, making new friends and excelling in her new school. They lived in a modest house with a view of mountains that seemed impossibly far from the Houston streets where Maria had spent most of her life. But the fear never entirely left. Every unfamiliar car, every stranger's glance, every unexpected knock on the door sent Maria's heart racing. The FBI had assured her that Dante was in federal prison for 20 years, that his organization had been fractured by arrests and infighting, that she was safe. But Maria knew better. The Bloods had long memories and longer reach. Someone, somewhere, would eventually find them. It might take years, maybe decades, but someone would remember the waitress who stole $3 million and lived to testify about it. One evening, 2 years after the trial, Maria was closing up the library when she noticed a man watching her from across the street. He was young, early 20s, wearing red sneakers. Their eyes met, and he smiled before turning and walking away. Maria's hands were shaking as she called her FBI contact. "I think someone's found me. We'll send someone to check it out. Are you sure?" Red sneakers. He was just standing there, watching. The FBI investigated, but found nothing. No known gang members in the area, no suspicious activity. They chalked it up to paranoia, but Maria knew what she'd seen. That night, she sat Sophia down for a serious conversation. The girl was 10 now, old enough to understand the gravity of their situation. "Baby, we might have to move again." Sophia's face fell. "But I like it here. I have friends. I know, and I'm sorry, but keeping you safe is more important than anything else. Is it because of what you did? Taking the money? Yes. And because I testified against dangerous people?" Sophia was quiet for a long moment. "Mama, do you regret it? What you did?" Maria looked at her daughter, healthy and vibrant, alive because of that choice. "I regret that we have to live like this. But I don't regret saving you. I never will." They didn't end up moving. The man in red sneakers never reappeared, and gradually life returned to its new normal. Years passed. Sophia became a teenager, then a young adult. She got accepted to college, studying pre-med, wanting to help others the way doctors had helped her. Maria aged, her hair graying naturally now, instead of from dye. She made friends cautiously, dated a kind man who worked at the hardware store, and never asked too many questions about her past. She built a life that was peaceful, if not entirely free from fear. On Sophia's 18th birthday, they were having dinner at a nice restaurant, celebrating her acceptance to medical school, when Sophia asked the question Maria had been dreading for years. "Tell me the truth about what happened, all of it." So Maria did. She told her daughter about the desperation, the planning, the theft. She told her about the warehouse, the fear, the FBI, the trial. She told her about Dante's face in the courtroom and the promise of revenge. "I turned you into a fugitive," Maria finished, tears streaming down her face. "I stole money from murderers and then dragged you into hiding for the rest of your life." Sophia reached across the table and took her mother's hands. "You saved my life. Everything else is just details. But you can never have a normal life. You can never be who you really are. I'm alive because of you, Mama. That's all that matters." 15 years after the theft, Maria received a letter forwarded through the FBI. It was from Dante, writing from federal prison. The envelope had been screened and deemed non-threatening, so they'd passed it along. Inside was a single piece of paper with a handwritten message. "I respect what you did. You had courage. Your debt is paid. Live your life in peace." Maria stared at the letter for a long time, unsure whether to believe it. Dante was up for parole in 5 years, and this might be a long con, a way to make her let her guard down. Or it might be genuine, an acknowledgement from one parent to another about what you do for your children. She burned the letter and never mentioned it to Sophia. Life continued. Sophia graduated medical school and became a pediatric cardiologist, specializing in the same conditions she'd suffered from as a child. Maria retired from the library and spent her days gardening and volunteering at a local women's shelter, helping other mothers in desperate situations. She never returned to Texas. She never tried to contact anyone from her old life. Elena Rodriguez died the day Maria Lopez became Jennifer Carson, and that was how it had to be. 20 years after she'd walked into that warehouse, Maria sat on her porch watching the sunset over the Vermont mountains. Sophia was visiting for the weekend, bringing her fiancé, a kind man who worked in renewable energy. They were talking about the wedding, about the future, about the grandchildren Maria might someday hold. Maria thought about the choices we make, the prices we pay, the lines we cross. She'd stolen $3 million from dangerous men and somehow lived to tell about it. She'd testified against a gang leader and survived. She'd given up her identity, her past, her hometown, but she'd gained the one thing that mattered, her daughter's life. The sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, the colors of both blood and hope. Maria closed her eyes and allowed herself finally to believe that they were safe. Not because the danger was gone, it would never be entirely gone, but because she'd faced the worst and come through it, and that gave her a strength that no gang, no threat, no fear could take away. Sophia called from inside, "Mama, dinner's ready!" Maria stood, joints creaking with age, and walked inside to where her daughter waited. She'd paid the price for her choices, and she'd pay it gladly every day for the rest of her life, because some things were worth any cost, and a daughter's heartbeat was the most precious thing in the world.